University in our history program there, but I really work with American law. And my focus is on artist contracts and artist rights laws, or artist legal issues. As it queues up, so I'm just going to walk you very, very quickly through kind of the crux of my research, which I'm amazed to see. And I get a lot of questions about this very document in front of you from artists and other developers who are thinking about new ways of making artist contracts utilizing smart contracts in blockchain. This is the Artist Reserve Rights Transfer and Sale Agreement. It's a boilerplate artist contract from 1971 that was developed by a curator of conceptual arts at CLOB and a lawyer, Robert Pujansky. It was designed to, this is CLOB's words, remedy some generally acknowledged inequities in the art world, particularly artists' lack of control over the use of their work and participation in its economics after they no longer own it. It was expected to be the standard form for all transfer and sale of contemporary art, and according to CLOB, was made as fair, simple, and useful as possible. It could be used as is or slightly altered to fit artist-specific situations. And the terms that were included in the contract, it's actually a big poster, which is going to be slide. But included in the contract was a 15% royalty the artist would get on the accrued value of resale of their work, a record who owns it at any time. It would grant them exhibition veto rights, the right to borrow the work, rental income from exhibition, and reproduction rights. So it was designed to address a number of artists' rights that were not addressed in US law at the time, and also some of which are still not, particularly resale royalties. And it took a huge amount of influence from existing European artist rights laws, again, particularly resale royalties. And I'll just say really briefly, can you go to P4? We don't need to. So just briefly, the way that the document works is it's only a contracted first sale, so between the artist and the first collector. And at the first sale, the artist and collector would sign it. That notice, you would make a Xerox of this form. That notice would be filled out and affixed to the back of the work or a certificate of authenticity. And then when the work is resold, this transfer agreement and record would be filled out by collector 1 and collector 2, and then so on, collector 2 and collector 3. So it's collector and collector who can contract with each other moving forward. Now, the terms in the agreement don't really operate just as contract. It's really a covenant system. It's a property registration system. And there are many reasons why it's never been actually picked up as a standard, which we could talk about. But what's fascinating to me in this space, and again, which I get questions about a lot, is how the goals of this document, which were to come up with a kind of tracking mechanism, and again, sort of really an actually automatic way that artists would be able to receive resale royalties, it wasn't really successful with this document, but how these aims might be possible now with these new platforms.
Good afternoon. My name is Dexter Wimberly. I'm an independent curator, and I've just joined this panel. I came here today to attend, and now here I am. You know, you talk about a combination of decentralization and utter anarchy. But seriously, I've been working as a curator for over a decade, and during that time, I've also worked with a number of nonprofits, including Independent Curators International, that's actually not far from here, it's based here in New York, the Museum for African Art as the communications director, and also, until recently, I was the executive director of a nonprofit in Newark, New Jersey called Algira Center for Contemporary Arts. During my time working as a curator, I've come into contact with hundreds of artists at various stages of their career, and I've had the great fortune of exhibiting their work in museums and galleries internationally. But also, as a byproduct of working with these artists, many of them have become my friends. And so as you get to know artists, one of the things that becomes apparently clear is that they don't have that many advocates. They have a lot of collectors, they have a lot of people who are interested in making money off of them or perhaps with them. But in terms of individuals that are keenly focused on making sure that they are okay and surviving and thriving off of their work, it's a very, very small group of people. And so one of the reasons I became a curator is because I was interested in how artists live and how they survive. In my prior life, I ran an advertising agency for 13 years, and I came across many graphic designers who actually had MFAs in painting and sculpture, but they're designing logos for companies because you got to make a living. And I was very fascinated about this sort of duality, this keen desire to bring beauty and interesting things into the world, and then this necessity to make money to live, especially in a place like New York City. So I won't go on much further right now, but I'm very excited to have this conversation and share whatever I can.
I'm Cynthia Gayton. I was on the first panel, so hopefully you'll forgive me if there's any repetition of what I say. But I'm a practicing attorney also in Virginia and Washington, D.C. Those are the places where I'm committed. I've been a volunteer attorney for Washington Lawyers for the Arts for over 20 years now, so I'm very much engaged with the artist community. I had an art gallery, so I was kind of like thinking to myself, why aren't the artists that I'm dealing with making any money? And then I said, well, maybe I need to get on the other side of that and see what is going on. And so I had a gallery for 3 years, and it really taught me a lot about the dilemmas that artists are facing. And for the most part, I have to say fundamentally, the contracts need to change because they are skewed in a way that were intended for a process from 100 years ago. And a method is certainly with music, the way that copyrights were allocated, all of these things that have been inherited. And attorneys, that's how you make your living, is you're applying precedent, the things that happened before. You're not necessarily forward-looking. So as a result of this 20 years and still not much of an improvement, I was really excited to see what was going on with blockchain. Because if you can design a contract in a smart contract way that is favorable to the artist, then a lot of these problems could potentially be solved. And then what did I come up against was first sale doctrine. So for those of you who don't know what that is, first sale doctrine basically in the United States means that once a piece, something is sold, that person who purchases it can do anything with it. Now, what that does not mean is that, for instance, for visual art or a painting, that person doesn't have the copyright to the work. That stays with the artist unless the sale includes the sale or the assignment of the copyright. Okay. So what's interesting about how this is going to work as a digital asset, tokens and things like that, is how does the first sale doctrine apply? Because right now in the United States, it works in the sense that that's the reason why people have paintings in their house. They don't have to, they can stab it, they can burn it, they can do whatever they want with it, and the artist can't stop it. But in Europe, as an example, that is not the case. They have what they call moral rights. The author has moral rights in the work, and so it's more of an idea of an identity of the artist that does not diminish just because it was sold. So they are entitled to future royalties. So this is a real different approach to the value of art in the United States, which the benefit of that, of course, is that when people see how these prices go up so high and all these kinds of things, you would think things might be a little bit different if the contract said, the artist is going to get a percentage of this, and then perhaps you would see artists being better off. But so I'm very excited about this. I think this is going to be the thing that pushes the envelope. I've been waiting for a long time since I graduated from law school to see a change in the contracts because they're archaic. Things don't run that way anymore. And they only benefit the people who already have a vested interest in the success of the old model. So this is a potentially new business model. And I also teach. So again, the professorial, I apologize for that too, but that element of it in terms of dealing with the software and those kinds of things is interest to me also. So thank you for having me here, and hopefully we can get some changes.
Oh, there you go. Cool. Well, everyone here probably already knows what a smart contract is, but I figured maybe that's a good place to start because a lot of people say it's neither smart nor really a contract. What is it, Cynthia?
Well, from my perspective, the smart contract, well, it's just a series of transactions that are implemented by code, and there's no intervening human that requires the process of the software to move forward. That's the beauty of the thing, is that it doesn't require any human intervention. So the transaction can go through, no human is involved with it. So that's what a smart contract is the code that enables enables a transaction. And so that's what it represents. The contract part of it, and of course that was the first thing that interested me, was the contract. Now, is this a contract? In many ways it is, because as long as there's money that's involved, because there is in terms of contracts, certainly with Ethereum where there's gas, if there's money involved with moving the transaction forward, and you have legal parties and everybody's agreed to the terms, whether they could be moving one step forward. It doesn't have to be significant movement, it doesn't have to be a significant act for it to be a contract if you're getting paid for it. So there's contract elements to it, and so there's but I think looking at the minutia creates a lot of dilemmas, because you don't want every single movement of a process that's actually going forward to be scrutinized in this, the same way as actually the terminal points, the first initiated and at the end. That's more important, because those are the human minds, hopefully, that have made a determination about entering into this agreement. So.
Thank you. So, we're talking about blockchain as it applies to art, but art, of course, is so many different things, and so I feel like I need to put every question that I'm asked in the context of a particular industry. And so, just to sort of dive into physical objects, it's called fine art. What, in your opinion, what is sort of the most exciting possibility that blockchain presents? What's the most revolutionary? What's the thing you'd like to see most as a result?
I'm really biased in favor of retail royalties across the board, but I mean that's one issue. But I do think that it's really important just to take advantage of the fact that this actually is a platform that might really enable a shift in these kind of constant, inequitable, I don't even want to call them negotiations, but negotiations as they play out now, where, artists might have like a term in an agreement for something like retail royalty, but good luck enforcing it, when you have so little power kind of in that negotiation. I mean, that's one very broad example. But, I mean, I do think that this platform could really just open that up in terms of, on one hand, negotiations are something I don't want to lose, and I think actually artist contracts can be a very interesting site of operating against the kind of typical like hyper-rationality of agreements where like other terms or more kind of interpersonal terms are able to enter, but at the same time, we still need to deal with the question of inequity and power outcomes, and this is a way of dealing with that. I think it's massively.
If I could add to that, and I think it's general common knowledge that the art world is not regulated. Right? I mean, I say that thinking that most people realize that, but the reason that it's unregulated is because of something you just touched on, and that because there's a symmetry of power and information. And the people that have the disproportionate amount of power and information don't really see it in their best interest to have the art. There's also another piece of this, and you kind of touched on that as well, and that is if you create obstacles for transaction, really the people that are at the sort of the bottom tier, and that's a terrible terminology, but I just mean it in terms of just like economically, the people who are making the least amount of money off of their sales are the ones that are in the position where they're the most vulnerable to any obstacles to making a sale. Right? So, for example, I know many artists who sell work directly from their studio, and they do it the same way you would sell a hot dog from a hot dog stand. right? In the sense that someone comes in, they see something that they want, they agree on the price, and then the person walks out with the object and they pay their rent. If they have to go through 5 steps in order to make that transaction happen, they may not actually do it, and then they may not be able to pay their rent. So I'm not trying to advocate against there not being the steps. I'm just saying that there are some practical implications for any emerging artist that sort of has to abide by certain sort of rules and ramifications. So assuming they are paying their income taxes on the money they receive, and assuming that the collector that buys the work is scrupulous, not someone who's just going to, I don't know, do any number of things any collector could do with the work. But it concerns me to some degree, even though I am a staunch advocate of artists and their rights and the action of their rights, I am very, very concerned about the government getting deeply involved in regulation and the sort of enforcement of different things within the art world. And I don't say that as like a blanket term, but I mean, there's a phrase that says, that which is measured is regulated. And to the extent that there are a lot of artists who are actually thriving off the ability to do things. And I get fearful for them, for artists who could no longer do that, right?
So, did you want to respond at all to the?
Look, a couple things, having the gallery and then advising artists, what's consistent, and I was talking about this earlier today, is there's no magic bullet. Blockchain isn't going to solve the problems that are kind of endemic in the sense of our artists considering themselves to be businesses. Because if you don't push your work, if you don't do those things that are necessary to be successful as a business and being an artist, blockchain is not going to help you. Because you could have the most awesome token and even the most awesome art, but if you don't do the steps that are necessary to get that work forward, it doesn't matter what the technology is.
And I have a question. There's obviously, I'm here because I'm interested in the implications of blockchain to art, but I'm also quite curious about the implications of blockchain to art that is not digital. There are a lot of significant artists that we've all heard of: Warhol, Haring, Basquiat, and they have, and this, you can go on and on with that list, hundreds if not thousands of artists, but they have people whose jobs were primarily to authenticate the art. And because of lawsuits that have been filed by collectors who've been told that, no, that Haring is not real, or that Basquiat is not real, or that Warhol is not real, they no longer authenticate paintings. Right? And so I'm interested and curious of any insight as to how blockchain applies to a physical painting.
Yeah, so I work at a startup called Archetype.
Speak up, please. I mean, stand up.
Yeah. I work at a startup called Archetype, and that is what we're doing. We're building a registry of physical artworks to provenance and their history and other events in the life cycle of an artwork, like an attestation from the Williamson Plattner Institute, for example, to put it all on the blockchain, so that you can start to have the object being emancipated from the owner, from other things, and really have it be the center and build out its whole life cycle.
But what happens when you find two?
So I think the first step is to make it transparent, right? To make it out there, to make it clear so that people can, because right now it's all very opaque and you can't keep track of it, right? So at least here it's transparent, it's all in one place. And then the next step is how do we create, or I don't think Artery is a company to do it, but there are a lot of companies out there researching unique identifier technology so that they can say this work, and then we can match that information is connected then to these data.
So we don't have to revert, go to the bloody fingerprint.
Exactly. So there's all sorts of DNA sprays, gigapixels, different like mapping that are being explored, but I don't think anyone's found the perfect answer yet. But
Yeah.
it's exciting technology.
Are your clients collectors or artists?
So,
or institutions? Or
well, I think one of the differentiators for Artery is that we are only putting in the blockchain data coming from vetted sources. So we're not letting individuals register their own works. So for an artist, it would be through their gallery, and the dealer has to be vetted by some sort of standardization committee, such as to be found for Art Basel. And then for most dealers, so we're entering into partnerships with large vetted institutions that have data and are willing to put it on the blockchain. And then you, as the owner of the work, can get the registration. So hopefully everybody, both sides.
How do you spell Artery?
ARTORY. Yeah.
Well, the other thing that, again, blockchain is not going to solve fraud. People are going to, they make a living trying to create exact duplicates of physical art, and they get the right paint, and they do all that sort of thing. So the blockchain is not going to solve that. I'm actually more interested in what blockchain can do for art right now. That we have the technology to and verification, because though the experts are not going, I don't think they're going away. I don't think that blockchain is actually going to displace them. In fact, I think their influence might increase because there'll be long-term implications for their verification. And again, there's the risk anytime somebody does that sort of authentic, that making sure that it's authentic, there's going to be the risk. But if you're a professional and that's your expertise, then that would be something you would have assumed anyway, right?
Yeah.
You would know that there would be risk in making a mistake, but it wouldn't be a good fraud if it was easy to detect. So that's my.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think authentication and maybe I'm biased, but authentication and the role of the expert in the work is certainly never going to go away. I mean, the catalog resume, as the resource for provenance tracking or unused artist catalog is key. But one thing that Cynthia raised, and actually this question just raised for me, that I really have as a major question about how any of this is going to work with the art market, is the fact that the art market depends so much on secrecy. It's just built in. That is the norm. Transactions are discreet, and especially again on the resale market, oftentimes buyers and sellers, dealers don't want really have a big interest in not putting all that information out there. And so how that norm is going to shift, and all of this is going to take a lot of norm shifting. It's a big question that I have.
Yeah. I'm glad one of my questions is, can we assume, since there's so much secrecy that is carried out for the purpose of artificially, arguably, right? I mean, raising prices. Is it safe to assume that if we did introduce radical transparency here, that prices wouldn't be nearly as high for a lot of certainly the more expensive art? Is that a safe assumption? And why does it matter?
It definitely is. I mean, it's funny because I was just talking to someone about this the other day. A taxi driver asked me recently, what do you do? You tend to not tell them the truth because you don't have that conversation. I told him, and then he said, so let me ask you a question. How is the painting worth $250 million? I said, here we go. And I paused for a moment and I said, okay, we have 5 minutes. I'm going to try to answer it in like 30 seconds. And I said, the first question you need to ask yourself is, how does someone have $250 million to spend on a painting? Okay. When you answer that question, because of disparity of income and history of the world, right? Then you can answer the question, how's a painting worth $250 million? Because two people with $250 million both want it. There you go. And if it's Cezanne's the card players, they're gonna fight for it, right? But all of that, anecdotal stuff aside, the reality is that a painting that's publicized as being sold for $250 million actually probably didn't sell for $250 million. That's the other side of it. There's a lot of misinformation as it relates to the final price of things. I mean, without getting into how auction houses work, the fact is, the hammer price is a combination of a lot of different factors. And in some cases, it's the auction house buying the work back in themselves. So there's a lot, so there's a lack of transparency. It's funny because you could say there's a lack of transparency, but I like to say that the art world is transparent for good news, but not transparent for the bad news.
Yeah.
So along the same lines, blockchain obviously is a technology. What we're talking about are implementation of technology, how will it change the market? But a lot of what we're talking about is changing norm, changing behavior, and I think inherent in what we're saying and in our hopefulness is that there will be a shift in the balance of power towards the artist, right? And so my question is, to what extent will blockchain naturally cause that? And if it won't, and if the answer is well, there's no reason to really hope that it will, then what will? Why are we hopeful?
I think one of the most powerful things is that you can test out which contract works. If nobody wants to enter into an agreement with you because you're asking for too much for it, you don't have to use it. You can come up with another approach. As the artist, there are some things that you can tweak and see what type of contract am I going to be able to first make sure that I'm paid for, and then also, is it worth it to me? And is somebody going to agree to those terms? And I think there's a little more flexibility with playing around now, and if artists are willing to take the challenge of asserting what they think they are owed, because that's the other element, is that's what I would hear all the time, is they entered into an agreement, they didn't know the terms, and they're upset because they thought that they'd get X. It wasn't even in the document, right, that was there. There were expectations that were unrealized. So I'm hoping, and I don't know whether, while it might be unrealistic, I'm hoping that artists take it upon themselves to assert an increased level of control because they can.
It's also, I think, it's a generational thing as well. I mean, to answer your question about how blockchain fits into this, in my humble opinion, there may not be much, you can do sort of across the board in one fell swoop, but I think that young artists are in a position to start setting the standard for how they want to be dealt with. It takes a bit of guts and certainly some risks involved, but I think that, how you start your career has a profound impact on where your career goes, right? And for example, I was talking to an artist just this morning about a contract that he's been presented, and it's really funny, we keep saying contract. Most artists I know don't have contracts with their galleries, so that's just a whole nother conversation we can have, but which is sort of strange but true. But he was concerned about one or two clauses in the contract and was afraid to push back against the gallery on these issues. And I said, John Doe, I said, if you are not comfortable asking for what you deserve today, you will never ask for it a year from today. And he said, you know what, you're right. And I was like, if she walks away from this agreement because you want to change that, you're going to go into a bad relationship with this gallery from day one.
Yeah.
So that, it's part of it, having the guts to see your value, right? And so back to blockchain. I mean, if you're saying to a gallery that this is the kind of technology I want to use to protect my work, to track my sales, to do this, they may scratch their head and not even know what you're talking about. But if you know what you're talking about, maybe you could educate them and get that relationship going from square one.
Yeah. I mean, I think this point that you just made about the fact that most artists do not have contracts, and the first thing that a lot of people, certainly in the gallery world or anywhere in our world, will say is like, what contracts? Nobody uses contracts. I mean, it's still, this is not, that already is not the norm. So just getting to the point of using a contract can already, one, be read as an aggressive thing because of our legal culture and many other factors. But already getting to there can be a big task. Which and even talking about the resale market, it's such a tiny, tiny fraction of artists who even get to that point. But I mean, maybe there's another way of framing all this too, which is like, what are the reasonable asks, or where are more kind of reasonable points to start out from, in terms of really, I mean, I'll say it again, like norm setting or norm shifting that might have to happen. I mean, there's an organization that I find very interesting and kind of starting this which is called WAGE, Working Artists for the Greater Economy, and they have made their mission for the last 10 years to basically work towards establishing a minimum standard of exhibition fees that artists would get when they show at nonprofit organizations, and organizations can get certified as being wage certified. which means that they agree to then pay those fees. But Wage has announced that they are working on a model artist contract on this platform. Which I think, but like seeing what they've been able to do in the last 10 years just with exhibition fees has been a really amazing model. But I think it's a matter of like asking on a small level and really precisely and kind of like sticking with it in the kind of asks that will resonate with younger artists, but also more established ones too.
It's funny you mentioned Wage. I just started reading about them.
Artists are entering into contracts. They may not have a written contract. They have a contract that there are some elemental terms, otherwise they wouldn't be getting paid at all. So the problem is not so much that there's the contract, it's that it's not clear what the terms are. That is, again, people don't like. My brother's a musician here. It took about 10 years for him to have the courage to ask for a written agreement to make sure he got paid what he expected to get paid. So an oral agreement is just as valid as a written one, absent there's other things, but for the most part, it's just as enforceable. So if you're willing to say it out loud and have the agreement, then perhaps you should write it down.
What's also been interesting to me, and I'm not an art dealer and I'm not an artist, so I've observed this stuff sort of like in action, right? What's interesting to me is that with the art world being as unregulated as as it's described or is, in fact, how few artists are willing to change the rules of engagement. It's sort of strange that you're in a situation where the rules are only agreed upon conventions, but aren't actually rules in the same way baseball has rules, right? And very few artists, and again, because it's this imbalance of power, right? And artists are often positioned as not having money and all of these things in the galleries, stereotypically wealthier than the artist, which isn't always true. But I just feel that artists have to make a decision about how they want to deal with the galleries. I mean, typically speaking, the gallery still gets 50% of an artist's sale, right? And that's an old norm that some artists are starting to push up against, right? And saying, well, let's wait a minute, I'm taking on some expenses here. So I think artists should start collectively thinking about how they can change their relationship with galleries, and they have to do it early in their careers. And if they're further along in their careers, then they have to have the willingness to take those kinds of risks.
I think that would be powerful. How do artists go about taking collective action though?
There are organizations who need to collectively make a decision about we're going to change the terms of the. Well, the problem, of course, with that is just like with anything when you're trying to get collective interest in doing something, is there's always going to be somebody who's willing to do it for less and willing to not abide by the terms. I mean, you can't. That while it might be nice to rely on a group where there's not somebody who's going to jettison and decide they're not going to. And then what do you do? Because that person is just as hungry as all the other.
I think one potential solution is not to force a system upon people, but provide a platform for artists to build up their reputation. So once you build up your reputation, people want to deal with you as an artist. They trust buying stuff from you, and then the same thing for the buyers. I kind of assume that people that buy art are probably people that have a collection. So if you're buying and reselling pieces in your collection, if you've done that multiple times and haven't had any disputes against you, then you build up your online reputation, and then you don't force this system on people. They adopt it willingly because they realize the value that it has.
Yeah, it's funny because it wasn't your point, but something that you said just kind of really just made me go. One of the things that I've noticed, and maybe this has direct implications for blockchain, one of the things I've noticed is that most of the disputes that I hear about between artists and galleries has to do with them not getting paid. This is typically, that's the most common thing. They took my X, sold it for this, and now I've been waiting on the check for 2 years, and they're just pretending like they don't get my emails or something like that. So I think I'd also love to maybe open up a conversation about how blockchain can actually help in those sort of scenarios as well, because if you're an artist in any city USA, you're shipping paintings to a gallery in Chicago, and that sort of what's a chain of besides the facts received? That's actually a question. I don't have any ideas.
That's perfect. Let's open it up to the audience, actually. The last 10 minutes. Questions?
That's what I'm suggesting. She's got a system called Codex that could probably answer that exact question. It's going live tomorrow. Ow!
Congratulations.
And the next panel.
Yeah, I'm thinking of the next title, but I think the chain of custody issue is definitely a real one, and we work with a lot of like shipping needs specifically to ensure that like through payments and certain criteria are met and validated. And I think that doesn't make shipping just the next step. If you have a way to create a digital identifier for that work, you can see the funds actually get paid, or you can see that when we don't get paid as well.
I wanted to get back to the reputation element of things, because there's certainly a huge emphasis in this, but then the difficulty is who's part of it, because if it is it the collectors who are assessing.
Like each entity would have their own reputation, and then you can vouch for other entities.
Right, but the thing is, if you're a collector, you may not care about certain parts of somebody's reputation. You might just care about their art. Or other reputational things are, do you pay your bills? Could be an
Well, in
element.
that case, if you're dealing with someone in that reputation, maybe that person wants to go through an area that has a higher reputation, like someone that could like authenticate the piece of art, so you know you're not getting ripped off. Then you're basically like transferring your reputation to another reputation in order for the transaction to be more smooth or like have more oversight. Of course, there's costs associated with that, but I mean, potentially in a network like that, they would organize itself around efficiency.
Yeah, the only thing that I think is that people tend to be around like-minded people who are already, interested in the same things anyway, people who may not already be part of that.
And I speak to your question. My name is Gregory. I work for Consensus, specifically on a spoke called Solarius. And that project is about creating a collective storytelling platform. And we are starting this platform off by paying artists directly for their work. So people who we've already been fans of, people who've done comic books, movies, all kinds of things. And we actually have those conversations with the artists and with each other about how do we value their work and what do we want to do with them. So we talk about, and I'm a social worker in terms of my education. I'm an Afrofuturist, feminist. Part of my job description is to come in there and speak about ethics. And so like one thing that we talk about is the fact that although we have all this technology available to us, it's only as good as we are. It's only as good as the people involved, it's only as good as our. They can make us more efficient, but if we're doing tremendously terrible things, then we become very efficient at those things. The one thing we do is we actually don't set it up so that an artist has to be paid what they used to be paid. We want to value them based on how they see their work and how we see their work. If you've never been valuing your work, and we see the value in it, we have a community that wants to engage with it, then you should be paid for that. You don't have to live with the barriers that are put in front of you. I heard you all talking about what happens to people's art in terms of after they sell it. And one thing, we're just getting started. We have a private alpha that anybody can apply to right now. But one of the things we talk about is that when we have somebody who is selling visual art to us and they're giving us the digital form of it, we say you keep the physical one. We're just paying for the digital rights to this, and we just get the first right of refusal. And we tell them that this is what we're doing at first, but we're open to changing it because not only do we want to change the way people engage in collective storytelling, but we want to change the way people engage with how they're compensating people for engaging in that format.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I'm going to, the gentleman right there, facilitation here. Do you mind standing up and sharing your name?
Hi, my name's Lewis. I think the big revelation here is that like the blockchain has shown us that we're all artists. If you want to bring your rare Pepe to the blockchain, and if someone wants to buy it, you can swap and not ask for permission from anyone. So it's really, so the blockchain is the gallery, right? So what is the blockchain? It's like a set of rules that the artist comes to the market. Okay, these are the rules through which you can buy and trade and do whatever you want with my art. And so the best set of rules are going to be the ones that propagate, right? So the artists that set the best terms for their own work, or the companies that make the terms for those works, are going to replicate. And I don't think it's not about really artists getting together and demanding something. It's about successful models are going to spontaneously generate, and then they're going to replicate.
As a developer, we have to remember that blockchain is a technology, and it all started there. Okay? We're trying to find ways of implementing all sorts of industries, all sorts of sectors. That going back to the statement, it's a cliche by now, they're neither smart nor contracts. I don't look at it as a contract. I look at it as a mechanism. If certain conditions are met, do this. If other conditions are met, do that. It's a vending machine. Okay? You put 2 quarters, you have a candy bar, you put $1, you can get the sodas. Whatever I don't write into that contract, what happens? In a real world contract, right? We write contracts all the time between individuals, between billion-dollar multinational corporations. We still then end up in court because we forgot something. We didn't account for all the possibilities. That's when we need the human element. And then we hopefully iron it out and figure it out, or we litigate for years. A computer program can't do that. Whatever wasn't written in there, I don't know if that makes it not a contract. That's why I look at it as a mechanism. It's not smart. If you didn't write it in there, it can't handle it. And so I don't know what that's why neither smart nor contracts. So it's definitely something that you have to be aware of.
That's a question that comes up a lot with smart contracts, not just in art, of course, is what happens if something goes sideways? Of course, you can still take the matter to court, but then even if you have a favorable outcome, good luck trying to actually undo the situation. We've got about 2 minutes. Maybe time for another question or two? I see a hand right there. You mind saying that, sir?
I was curious why the discussion of, say, like when digital Kodak 1, what Kodak was doing in at least governing the provenance of digital photographs. And of course, we're talking about art in general, but is that not a model that could be more widely applied? And I'm no advocate of Kodak 1 or any of its technologies. And then a second question is, imagine a thought experiment where you could, that every object in the universe has a unique signature, and that there will be even present-day technologies that can scan and encrypt that signature. Does that offer a way, once again, to protect provenance and to track, and aside from all the other issues of artists being underpaid and sort of the economic inequities that are built in? So 2 separate questions. One, what's happening in corporate space in an old player like Kodak, and then what does, say, some conceivable encryption scanning technology offer to protect at least the provenance of artwork through blockchain?
Anybody want to take that as our last answer?
Well, I'll hopefully not the last answer, but this kind of thing is, how do you protect the encryption and all that sort of thing? Again, people steal. So it's not that there's not going to be any silver bullet to solve that particular problem. But what I want to emphasize is that artists shouldn't be spending all their time fighting over something they've already done. In fact, they should be spending their time creating. So every time you're trying to find an infringement, all that time, I mean, I've dealt with cases that have gone on forever, all that time you could have been creating something. So hopefully that one thing that you did is not the only thing you could do. So while you're, and if I'm an attorney, you get paid, right, by the hour for every one of these kinds of disputes. Like, put your energy into the things that you can create. Try to do the best contract that you can, but don't spend so much time trying to protect one thing, because it can suck up your life and your life.
I think that's great advice to end on. And this conversation is not over, because the next panel is putting art and media on the blockchain. So let's give a hand to these panelists. Thank you so much. And then we don't have any wiggle room built into our time here, guys. So could we please see Scarab X, Kevin Ferreira, and then another Kevin McCoy from Monograph, Judy Mam from Dada, Roy Marome from WeMark Photography, Ahmed Elgamal from Art Rendex, also working with Verisart, Jess Fulgrave from Codex Protocol, and Lewis Parker from Archetype. Please come up to the front.
Thank you so much for the conversation. That was amazing. Yeah. So you based in New York?
I am. Well, I live in New Jersey, but I'm based in New York.
There's no difference, especially when you talk about New York. It just sounds like New York.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm an artist and I'm speaking at the club.
Oh, fantastic. Those are your chance to be with me. Let me,
Are you going to be here?
I'll be here for a little bit longer. I'm not sure exactly how late I'm staying.
So, if you're in a hurry, yeah. It's great to meet you. Yeah. Thank you for taking care of my artists.
Hey, I missed your name and your intro, but it's not your response. I want to thank you. Parker. Whenever you're
I'm on most of them, but I'm most active on Instagram as most people.
Okay.
So,
yeah, that's on here. What kind of work do you like to do?
Well, it's a great question. It's hard to describe because I work with all sorts of artists at different stages of their career. So painters, sculptors, performance artists, different ethnicities, different geographies, different genders. So it's all contemporary, though, living artists. Yeah.
I'm one such living artist. I do a lot of work in the industry, a lot of interactive work, some connection-based stuff. I'll send you a link to that. Check it out if you like. Thank you. I really appreciate your time. Great.
Oh, yeah. We went together to a dinner after that.
All right, thanks guys. So, as I was just saying to the panelists, who's moderating this panel? Where's the moderator? And then I looked down at my notes and I realized I'm the moderator. Woohoo! I'm moderating this. Yeah, let's get in it. So we may have some slides from some people. I know we do from Ahmed. Did other people need to do their own or send them to me?
So far,
It's a club. All right, I got that. Anybody else expecting me to get their slides from the club? No. All right. Great. So you put something down? Great. So I'll find those too. So why don't we just to kick it off? Let's start with Kevin. And again, I'll just mention, I don't want to cut off your guys' conversation, but it can't happen in this room. So go into the engine room if you want to keep talking. The other thing is, it looks like we still have maybe a chair or two up in the front or around. So try and find an empty chair if you would like to sit down. So Kevin, you want to kick it off to tell us about Monograph and the problem that you're trying to solve and how long you've been trying to solve it.
Sure. It's kind of like talking about ancient art history, but 4 years ago this week at the New Museum, a conference called 7 on 7 presented the idea of Monograph, presented the first functional process of it, in which I'm an artist by training, I'm a professor at NYU, and it was taking work, in this case animated GIFs, and creating this kind of idea of put it on this thing called a blockchain. We used Namecoin back then, and and from that time had software that was available to put work on that blockchain. We've migrated several times, but it's this topic that everybody on the panel here can relate to, this question of creating some idea of scarcity or exclusivity, or some concept of rights and rights transfer that could be attached to something as ephemeral and copyable as a digital media file. So Monograph as a platform, in various guises and in various ways, has provided technology and methods to allow people to do that. Our kind of most common tool is sort of an open, available opportunity for people to come and use our service to create different kinds of licensing structure around pieces of media, and we provide different ways for people to trade, buy, or sell those things, and record and show that provenance. All ideas that I think are germane to the topic right now. So that's the short story. It's a big panel, so I'm going to pass the mic.
Great, thanks. Let's hear from Jess next from Codex Protocol.
Hi. So Codex is, I got into this space in sort of 2016, and I wrote a master's paper on the applications of blockchain in the art world, and looked at pretty much everything from what artists were doing all the way through to what some of the big institutions were doing. And that was a really interesting process of trying to understand what people were doing and how we could move this forward to the benefit of everybody. And since then, I founded a company called Codex Protocol. We are interested in not necessarily being the kind of the interface with the end user, but really trying to create an interoperable solution so that there is functionality between the art insurance space, the auction world, artists producing their own work and registering them, fractional ownership models, and trying to create a holistic solution that's interesting for everyone. And I think as Joe pointed out earlier, that goes live this weekend, and we're celebrating with a great auction of crypto-themed artwork on Saturday. There's some artists in the room who've donated work. So it's great to be here in New York.
Awesome, great. So yeah, we're gonna skip again, and we're gonna go to Roy Mayroom. Did I say your name right? Or? Okay, great. So Roy is from WeMark. Tell us about your platform.
So hi everyone. Yeah, so my name is Roy. I'm one of the founders of WeMark.com. WeMark is a blockchain-based marketplace for digital content, starting with photos. And I think digital content was mentioned quite a lot today, but I'm not sure anyone has mentioned how centralized the industry actually is. So you have millions of customers, millions of creators and over 1 billion customers, but actually there are fewer than 100 companies that control the majority of distribution of digital content. And someone mentioned Spotify earlier. Anyone uses Spotify here? Yeah? So every time you use Spotify keeps 30% every month you pay. Every time you download an app, the App Store keeps 30%. Every time you download an ebook, 40 to 65% from the writer, which is crazy. Can anyone guess how much they're taking in stock photography?
Did artists get what, 40% now? 30%.
So every time you license a photo from agencies like Shutterstock or Getty Images, those agencies will keep up to 85%. 85%, yeah. So the photographer is going to be left with pretty much nothing. A lot of them are doing it as a hobby now because they can't do it anymore. So what we do is we eliminate the functionality of an intermediary. We're allowing photographers to license their content directly instead of going through a central agency. So we're transferring the majority of functions that a marketplace would do to a smart contract. And yeah, that's what we do.
Cool, thank you. On to you, Lewis, Archetype. Tell us all about it.
Yeah, so Archetype is a collection of smart contracts. So it's essentially a platform that allows people to tokenize any kind of information they want and have that information stored on another decentralized database called IPFS. So how that's relevant to artists is that it's an open platform for content creators, artists, singer-songwriters, spoken word, etc., to tokenize their content and have full ownership of that, and any sort of action they want to participate in, or any sort of curation they want to participate in, can be built on top of that fundamental layer of tokenization.
And Ahmed Al-Gamal, you can talk about Verisart a little bit as their advisor, and maybe around Dexter that's relevant too.
The intersection of art and blockchain, and Artrendics, where I'm the CEO and founder, which work at the intersection between art and AI. And together we are partnering to provide a solution to some of the questions that was raised in the previous panel. So with Verisart, basically, has been around since 2015. One of the actually the first company that have been taking art and in the blockchain, trying to register art. Basically, provide a certificate that the artist can generate for his art, log it on the blockchain, and best to hire the art and always be there. So if there's somebody trying to make a fake art, use AI, that's Artrendics part, to verify this is the exact art that is as another record. I don't think I need to go through that. But at our site, Artrendics basically look at the art, try to search what had been hashed in the blockchain and find similar arts, or if there's other copies of that art provided. And we also work on authentication using AI. We showed that we can identify drawings, for example, Picasso or Matisse or Chile, from individual strokes, one stroke at a time. There is a signal in the stroke that can identify the artist. Anyway, I don't want to take much more time. You can come back to this.
Thank you, Ahmed. Now let's circle back around to Judy Mam from Dada.
Hi, I'm Judy Mam from Dada.nyc, which is a social network where people speak to each other through drawings, basically creating visual conversations that they make these drawings in our own digital tool in our platform. And what we have now, that is a portrait of me that was made by our founder, Beatriz Ramos. And there's another slide that I think shows the magic of that. There you go. So these are visual conversations. Like somebody made a Mona Lisa, another person in another part of the world responded with another drawing, and each one of these drawings has been created by a different person. And it's a very magical place. And we have created a digital art marketplace on the blockchain where we're basically funneling some of the collections of drawings that we have on our platform, and to sell them as digital assets. So that's that.
Great, thank you. And then finally, we have a representative from the Scarab experiment, a mysterious and wonderful art experiment on the blockchain. Can you tell us about it? It's Kevin Ferreira.
Yeah, my name is Kevin Ferreira. I'm working with the Scarab experiment. And basically what it is it's an artist collective that's put on the blockchain. And what that means is that we use a cryptocurrency to monitor transactions and to include people as members into the group.
Does an artist have to be defined as being a single individual? Couldn't an artist achieve more if they had hundreds and thousands of people all working toward their goals? With the Scarab experiment, we're spearheading the idea that identity can be redefined by creating an artist known as Scarab, whose work will be the result of effort from thousands of individuals. It's a collective community on an international scale, where artists can work together for the sake of art. We no longer need to be artists selfishly scrambling for our 15 minutes in the spotlight. With the current typical online artist website, you have artists making profiles, fighting amongst millions of other profiles for viewer attention. I mean, really, how would any artist become successful in that outdated model? Through Scarab, artists can have access to high-end galleries, high-profile events, and international exposure to millions of people.
So really what this is an experiment. Can we make a collective that's sustainable and supports artists in order for them to create art for art's sake, versus where right now a lot of the art that you make is for businesses that need it for like graphic design or other aspects like that. So basically what the Scarab experiment is three things in one. First, it's the Scarab token, which is the cryptocurrency as art. So it's kind of in the vein of Damien Hirst, where we say it's art, and so it is, even though it's a cryptocurrency. The second aspect is the identity of Scarab. So that's where kind of all the members become involved, and everybody that holds a Scarab token is open to anybody that submits work online, and you can become part of Scarab. The last thing is the works of art. So it's going to have 50 official works of art. It takes about 1,000 submissions to make one, and we merged them using an AI that was open source by Google called Dream Generator, and another process that's still kind of in the works. But what is going to happen is you're going to have this work that's created by thousands of artists in the end, so that way everybody contributes, but nobody can claim ownership of it. So we're kind of playing on identity. Who is the artist, and what is the artwork? And that's just the pieces going through the generator of the submissions that we have so far. But it's really working up, and we're going to have our first official piece very soon.
So you make one piece out of how many?
1,000 submissions is one, and that's kind of arbitrary, just for the experiment to try it. You could really set any numbers.
Cool. So I want to open up the discussion here with talking about something that my husband, Scott Draves, calls the Vegas effect. So he allows people to vote on different designs at electricsheep.com, and the designs that get enough votes to become popular are allowed to mate. And it's a genetic algorithm that allows the artistic system to regenerate itself over time using the survival of the prettiest concept. The Vegas effect is that sometimes like rainbows, hearts, like not maybe necessarily the most like sophisticated or deep art is the art that gets the most votes. And so Scott, as playing God, needs to go in there and put in some more subtle works to keep the system from kind of going over the edge into, let's just call it pop. There are lots of different words.
Why not let it go? Give me a response.
Okay, so this is exactly the question that I want you guys to have among yourselves. How did you address the curation problem? Somebody spoke earlier, they're only allowing galleries who are even, not just any old gallery, mind you, but galleries who are already part of a registered system of galleries. Those are the only galleries that are allowed to put artists into their system. So somebody up here may have something that's really just open to anyone, and then there might be gradations of in between. So just jump in, grab a mic from your neighbor and say how you address the issue.
I'll jump on that. So basically, we accept any artwork. It's all visual mediums accepted. There's no curation that way. Everything's accepted. Anybody that submits gets a Scarab token, and they can submit as many as they want right now.
No limits.
No limits. Just keep submitting. And we have some people that submit tens, hundreds. So it is going to be a problem once we make it more sustainable. Right now, it works because it helps people become more involved. They tell their friends, hey, I'm getting all these tokens by submitting, so they can do that. And I really feel that art is so subjective. So like, who am I to say that this circle drawing is better than something that's taken somebody months to do it? And there's a time element, and I feel like that time and effort need to be defined maybe in some way, in some way in the protocol, but it really is something that we need to make work for the system.
Okay.
So
okay, it's just interesting because we also we don't have submissions. You go into the platform and you can start drawing. Anybody can start drawing, right? It could be professional artists, it could be fine artists, it could be you. Anyone here can start a drawing. We have a gamified system by which we create. You saw those conversations. In order to get a conversation of that kind of consistency, we needed to make it. Design it in a way so that somebody doesn't come and make some sort of garble, and then that's part of the conversation. So people have to accrue a certain amount of points, 200 points, which is not difficult, and then they can start answering conversations at their level. People from a level of, from that have, more skill can always answer. But we are trying to create community. So what we are encouraging is for as many people to participate in this conversation. So we don't have influencers, we don't have coding, we don't have yet curators. People reward with, they may give a like to a drawing, but what is interesting is that they start following other artists, they start drawing in other conversations, they start improving their game, and eventually we're going to have a system in which we want to incentivize not only the most. In our case, sometimes people, the things that will get the most votes are, for instance, the most hyper-realistic drawings, that they absolutely almost look like photography. But what about the person who does a drawing that is a great connector in a conversation, or that has a sense of humor, or that has incredible imagination, but not the same amount of skill? So we're taking all those things into account.
The way that we solve this is, firstly, I think, creativity and art is ultimately what we end up with as human beings, and so it's not for us to determine who is an artist and who isn't. Anybody can register on Codex. I think there are institutions within the art world and intermediaries who do play a really important role, though, and so we, as items pass through Codex, we allow people to attest to them, to kind of almost add a stamp, as it were, so that rather than that being the only onboarding mechanism, anybody can onboard, but history and accrue provenance as they go through the system. And so I think that's one way, but the other thing that I'm really excited about and doing some work on is kind of token curated registries, and the idea of kind of changing the way that we think about curation, changing the power structures that are involved with curation, and who is a curator, because I think that has some really interesting possibilities, as well as kind of changing that notion of an individual or a known institution having to curate art, but actually, as well as us all being artists, we can all be curators too.
So I forgot to mention that Archetype is also has a decentralized marketplace feature, so anyone can tokenize whatever they want and bring it to market. So again, to answer this question, I don't think there's a curation problem. I think the way to look at it is kind of going back to the anarchy decentralization dichotomy we were talking about earlier, where in one sense you have artists interacting with the blockchain, doing whatever they want, right? Having full tokenization rights and however they want to interact with the blockchain and getting that art tokenized. But then you have the problem of, okay, how do I make a market for my art? How do I get rewarded? How do I get the most eyeballs on my art? So that generally is going to be answered by getting in a good curation, or a nexus that curates the good from the bad, so that the people at large don't have time to sift through every single piece of art on the blockchain, get a curated collection. So what is a curation? Fundamentally is a business, right? So you have curations curations work both for the artist and for the consumer of content or the purchaser of the art. And so they're really fighting against each other. The best curation is the one that serves the needs of the artists and the art viewers and purchasers the best, right? So I think we're going to see a cool kind of like evolving combat process over time to see like what are the best curative
systems to allow this art to find a home in a buyer's wallet.
We just kind of reflect on that on similar points. Monographs totally open. You can register works and you run a marketplace different than what you guys are doing. But it's been, we've got 65,000 registrations, something like that, which is, I don't know if that's a big number or a small number, but it's enough number to, see some kind of trends. And over the years, it's interesting to see the same kind of power law, type of effects that apply in so many other cases where the vast majority of works, there's no interest, no traction, no transactions, nothing. They just kind of sit there. There's a kind of, 10% of the works that have some kind of action. There's some tiny sliver that people are really interested in. There's, price, action on it. There's, kind of history of transactions, in this kind of tiny little sliver of work. And so, those sorts of market effects, or desire or interest or quality or whatever, it's like those things happen, whether there's an active curatorial process on the platform or not. People will come to some kind of decision, through some sort of mechanism. And they said in the last panel, like, just because something's tokenized doesn't mean people want it, and so that we certainly found that to be the case with Monograph.
So in stock photography, actually, one of the biggest problems is that there's too much of it. So when you go on one of the agencies, you look for a photo, sometimes you can't find what you want, and you go through a lot of garbage, essentially. So curation is very, very important. So our strategy right now is to do the curation ourselves. But then when you think about it, other than setting preset rules that have to do with the resolution of the photo and stuff like that, you also need a set of eyes that's going to be professional. And who does that better than your fellow photographers on the platform? So in the future, the intention is to, in the tokenized economy, to give them the option to get those tokens and be a part of that curation process.
Curation and the future of curation in my mind. One of the things that we are focused on at Archetype is how to solve this problem, which is the millions of content comes to the internet, art content comes to the internet every day, all these platforms and others, and curation is impossible. So we think the future of curation is AI curation. You might not like AI being part of the creative process and deciding what's good art and what's bad art. It's my best idea, but I think it's happening. And it's not necessarily telling the art is good or bad. It's more telling what art you would like to see and what art you don't like to see, which is not much different than Netflix is doing by recommending movies or recommending books. However, the difference in art is all these recommendation systems are kind of blind. Amazon recommend a book for you just because somebody else wrote this book and had shared the interest with you without even looking at the book or it's totally blind. The same thing for Netflix. However, for art, there are different properties. Art usually is unique. You buy an art, and be the only one who bought that art. Maybe you might like the art, but you don't buy it. On top of that, recommendation system for art should not be blind. I should tell you, I create a collection of art for you, not because you share common interests with others, but because that art will have some psychological effect on you, and that's why you like it or you hate it, and that's how it should be done. So it's a very different way of doing involving AI to look at the art and curate it for the targets.
Thanks, Ahmed. Yeah, I really like that idea of having the recommendation engine, or essentially like what Google has done with search. If you think of every web page on the internet as that's all a piece of art, Google's done a really good job with search. You find the thing that you're looking for by putting in your keywords. I mean, I don't care how many stock photography photos are on WeMark, as long as when I go on WeMark, I can find the purple bicycle. And if I don't get a purple bicycle and I ask for a purple bicycle, then I don't like it. And so it's, I mean, I don't care if it has every art in the world, as long as I can find the art when I want that one. So, so my next question is, maybe a little related to what Kevin said with, there's a lot of people just put their art up there and then it just sits there and it doesn't go anywhere. I guess it's kind of a two-part question. It's the barriers to entry or the onboarding. Like, how much does it cost? Let's say I'm an artist, as many people in the audience are. How is it free for me to get on your system? Do I have to pay $20 to get an Ethereum wallet? Am I outlaying some kind of cost and then maybe just never recouping? And then I guess part B, any new ideas or new ways for me to promote myself and my work better than what I have today, which is like telling my mailing list, I made this painting, who wants to buy it?
So one of the problems we had with the Scarab experiment was barrier to entry. So a lot of artists are good at art, but they don't know cryptocurrency or how to open a wallet or get a Bitcoin address or an Ether wallet. So because of that, we noticed that we were not getting as many submissions as we would like within our system. So what we did was we made it so that they can submit their email, and they could also submit a Bitcoin address if they wanted to. So sometimes we get home addresses with that because people don't quite understand still, but they do submit their email. They got that, so we can hold their token on file, which is what we do. That happens. But because of that, we're also able to have a lot more people submit, and they can get tokens, and it's helping people become more involved in the project without having to know anything about crypto.
I guess we're a little different in that the value that we offer for artists is the value of they can be creative. And what we want to do for them is that they are going to be creative, they're going to draw on data. And actually, some of them are concerned, it was a bit of a hurdle to explain to our artists that they had to get their MetaMask so that we could, we have a collection on the blockchain. The artists that are in that collection needed to get a MetaMask wallet so that they could, get their money. And, we had to educate them on it. But what is interesting is that some of them are concerned that their experience of data is going to change the moment that money gets into the equation, because the value that they get out of having conversations, improving their skills, relaxing, using it as therapy, whatever it is that they come in for, they think, and I think it is true, that the value is far more, it's far more valuable than whatever amount of money they can get for the art that they sell. So our challenge is to actually keep the magic of data and have people come and draw for the sake of art, for the love of art, for the passion of art. And eventually, when we're going to launch a token, we're going to issue a token, it's all going to be participation based, so that we want all these artists to maybe get a check in the mail, just because they drew once on data, That's how what we're thinking of doing. So it's not about what they put out is free for artists. They don't have to do anything. I mean, they will have to get a MetaMask wallet, and that's all they need to do.
So uploading your photos on WeMark is free. It's always going to be free. They might not get accepted, but eventually it's always going to stay that way. And in terms of value, first of all, one of the most important values is that you're going to get paid a lot more, obviously. So that's such high fees in the industry. And also, if you think about it today, if you're a photographer and you upload your photos in one of the big agencies, you have no idea who it was sold to, you have no idea how much it was sold for. You have to give all of your rights basically to the platform so they can sub-license it, and you're not licensing directly. These are the things that we're going to solve. And also with blockchain, you could do really interesting things with photography. Nowadays, if you want, you hire a studio, you take a few models. Let's say if you're a model, you get paid $200. 2 years after, you find your photo on billboards and commercials. You're like, wow, I got paid $200. These are, $20,000 worth of commercials. What you can do once you rely not on a central agency, but on an autonomous, automatic entity, which is a smart contract, you can say, okay, come be a model for this picture, and you're going to get 5% forever, whenever it's sold. Wow, you're a well-known photographer, so I'm Canon or Nikon. Take the camera for free. I want 20% of every image you're going to sell in the future. So this is some of the value that is going to change the game, change the business.
I see the future as being, an artist puts his art out on a blockchain market, and then there's a market of bids and asks for this art, and whatever system it is accumulates, and it goes down to the corner store, and through whatever app he pays directly for something to eat and a bottle of water with his actual piece of art, and all the market logistics are abstracted away in another system, and that he never has to touch the currency that the merchant is receiving, right? So you will have artists living directly off of their art. Right now, yes, we are all building the rails to get from where we are to there. That's why I think it's really interesting, because we're bridging the gap of, are we building art systems, or at what point do we have to build payment processing systems and and easy to use front ends for crypto, which really does not exist. It's to the point where you can utilize crypto and not even know you're utilizing crypto, right? We're still a ways away from there, but I think the people making art businesses by necessity are spearheading that development. So yeah, so I see that's what the future, that's what the end goal is.
We, with Monograph, we really focused on ease of use and lowering the barrier of participation when we launched the first public-facing aspect of the platform. And make an account, you upload stuff, that's it. It's right there. And then you're presented with these kind of graphical ways of configuring these contracts. And it's just really interesting to see what people, where their hangups are, where what they know about, what they want to do, and asking people to make those choices around remix rights or derivative work rights, or set a price on their work, or classify it as is this an art object or is this a commercial image? And by and large, people don't want to know, or don't know what to do in those contexts, even when you're kind of presenting it in these very streamlined ways. And so people, creative people, artists, whatever, are not inclined to do that, we found.
Why do you think that is?
I don't know. I think that because there's such this question of value, what's the value of this, of what I'm doing, and you're asking them to kind of have this self-reflexive moment, and it's difficult. And they kind of pull back. Also, all the blockchain stuff is happening in the background. We have this whole intricate set of records. We use Bitcoin blockchain. MetaMask didn't really exist when we launched, and the logs show people hardly ever look at it. It's just within a creative community, it's just a kind of service. It's a kind of marketplace. It's a kind of thing that they're interested in, but it exists in this universe of other ways of creating work, kind of getting work out there, having conversations. There's definitely a section of people that are crypto people that are interested in that, and they're coming to the platform kind of from that mindset. And then there's a smaller percentage that are kind of indie creators that are may or may not be, they kind of know about it, whatever, but it's not, they don't have that kind of fervor necessarily. And so it's just interesting to see how that works. And I totally agree with your point about the, and that's a big difference with kind of post-CryptoKitties platforms that are unabashedly crypto-centric with the wallet, managing your own keys, MetaMask, all that stuff. It's a wonderful thing, but there's still so much more to develop to make that process truly easy. And as a long-time practicing artist, managing archives and whatever, the thought of managing those private keys over a long term is daunting. This is a crypto crowd. How many people have managed private keys for more than say 5 years? It's always in your back of your mind, like that key management thing. And that's, that really has to get worked out.
Well, I think the general reason why the people who are creatives are not the same people who want to like fiddle quickly. So the reason why people creating are not the same people who want to like figure out the best possible logical system to accrue profit for their creations is because literally they're using a different part of their brain, and that usually there's not that much. If they're specializing in that part, then they're not using the logical part as much, right? That's just real talk. So I think the Warhols and the real big commercial artist powerhouses we're going to see are people who can utilize both, because it's one part to create a work of art, right? Like we've been creating works of art since time immemorial, but now it's how do I interact with the hyper marketization that the blockchain offers in order to accrue the most profit for my art, right? So it's a cool dance between these two poles. And I don't know the answer, but I know that the people who find their own niche balancing these two will definitely be at the forefront of benefiting from what the blockchain has to offer.
Jess, did you have a comment? Okay. We've got just a couple minutes left. I want to include the audience in this conversation. Jeff Becker, photographer for Creative Technique. Thank you so much for all your work.
Obviously, I'm a photographer, so I make images to sell prints of, make unique pieces, and I make stuff I can license. Which one of you do I actually want to talk to?
Well, it depends. What do you want?
I want the same thing all of us want. You've got to sell things if you want to eat. Right? So some of it's sales and some of it's licensing deals.
I don't think there's a good answer now. I think kind of the people trying to figure out what that answer is are here and building those platforms. And once the dust settles out, we'll see like what platforms are best for which use cases. But until then, it is going to be the forward-thinking entrepreneurial type creatives who research all the possibilities available and find out what is best for me, how can I accrue the most benefit, right? So it'll be a while before that answer is just kind of commonplace and you don't have to think about it. But if you want an answer, definitely do your research.
I like to just crash into things, figure it out, get a little order.
Or go on to WeWork.com and upload the photos.
You in the front?
Yeah, I want to know what's the percentage that you would take.
In our case, the smart contracts, in the first sale, the artist gets 70% and Dada gets 30%, but it gets reinvested into the community. But the beautiful thing about smart contracts is that, which is not what happens in the real world, is that on every subsequent sale, the artist will get 40%, yes, 40%, on the secondary market. The person who owns the drawing will get 60% of the profit and Dada will get 10%. So we like that because that ensures that there will be like a royalty. 60, yeah, well, I knew my math was kind of weird. 60, 30, 10, yes. Thank you.
So we take 15%, we give photographers 85%. We believe that with 15% we can sustain a good distribution platform and work for the photographer with marketing.
So Archetype's not quite a company, more of like a protocol platform. So we take 0%. It's just a smart contract interface where you retain the ownership rights of your work. So you might pay, I don't know, 50 cents to $2 for in gas just to actually run the smart contract that's paid directly to the miners. And the thinking here is that create this open platform, and now we can start to create the cool, innovative curations on top, and then it'll make sense perhaps to monetize different facets of those creations, of those curations. So if anyone here has some good ideas for a curation, hit me up afterwards and we'll talk.
Say that the Scarab experiment, they 100% just goes back into Scarab itself and representing that artist and kind of getting the word out as an international collective of many artists. So.
Super interesting. So in a minute, we're going to go into a break, but first I wanted to take a moment to thank the City of New York. It's been super supportive for Creative Week over the past 3 years. We have been supported by EDC, and we have a special guest representing the city today to say a couple words.
Yeah, I just wanted to, I'm Isabel's co-founder for Creative Tech Week, Dawn Barber, and Isabel and I wanted to create this space for these kinds of conversations and for the people using creative technology in creative ways all over the city. I wanted to bring the city on because we feel it's important that the city acknowledges what an amazing community we are and we have become, and Isabel has grown, and we've all grown together here. I can think of no better person who understands communities. She is our Manhattan Borough president, so she understands Manhattan particularly well, but she really cares about the people of New York. Now, is she an expert on blockchain and blockchain technology? No. Is she an expert on communities? Yeah, I wanted to share her here this evening. She'll just say, a few words to know our community and to realize how awesome we are and what an important part of New York we are. Gail Brewer, our Manhattan Borough.
Thank you very much, Dawn. Well, this panel is phenomenal. I've been dealing with, zoning and tenants, schools and principals, and I don't know what today. So this is very exciting, and thank you for including me. What I do know, and there's a direct relationship, is I passed the open data bill. So the fact of the matter is now all 80 city agencies by the end of this year have to put all of their data on a data portal. And we are trying to make a big difference, both for city agencies and for the public, because you can imagine city agencies didn't know what they have in terms of data. So we have actually been working with the community boards. Dawn mentioned that I care about the community, and I'm sure people in this room do also. We have 12 in Manhattan and 59 in the city, and we're working with students and staff to be able to get them to understand the data, to be able to use it so that you walk into your community and your block association and you know exactly what's going on in your area. That is not true now. And we're trying to make sure that the data that the city has and the real estate industry has is available locally. So that's what I know. But I can tell you that it's like the Wild West here. This is what's so exciting about blockchain. And I also want to thank Andrew Hopper because, there is a meetup, as you probably know, for people in government who are interested in blockchain and figuring out how it could be appropriate. And I think that, there are so many applications similar to what you were talking about that it is still to be thought about in a way that is applicable to the artist community. It also could be very applicable, even things like property. I mean, right now, to keep track of real estate for tax purposes, that would be a perfect way in which blockchain documentation, because of transparency, we're able to figure out a way to prevent property title fraud. If anybody's ever had to buy something in terms of real estate in New York, those title companies are a trip, and I'm sorry if there's anybody in the room who works on them, but haven't dealt with them. And then, of course, there are issues about banking and healthcare, national security, citizenship, driver's licenses, vehicle registration, birth certificates. The list goes on and on. If you think of 80 city agencies just with our $88 billion budget, you can think of ways in which blockchain could be really an asset. So I think similar to the discussion that we can never share all of our databases. Oh my God, that would be a terrible idea. People would learn about all of their personnel information wrong. Hasn't happened. And the information is able to be used for GIS and all the other applications, hopefully to make people's lives better. So I'm here to say congratulations. I have been to a couple of meetups with Andrew. Not to say that I understand one goddamn word that's happening, but I certainly will take what this wonderful panel had to say I was thinking, laughing, thinking, you know, if we had blockchain and elected officials, maybe they wouldn't go to jail or something. Thank you very much, Dawn, and I'm looking forward to working with you.
Thank you, Joe Brewer, Manhattan Borough President. One more minute before we thank our panelists. I just want to say a couple of things. So, first of all, the next hour, if you are going to leave the building to go get dinner, this would be the hour that you would not miss anything. However, we have put out as much of a spread as we could possibly put out so that you do not have to leave the building and you can just eat here. We have a ton of beer, we have lots of wine. We have a tech art exhibit through that door and into the gallery. The bathrooms are upstairs on the second floor. You